Hi, James. How are you today?
I'm great. How are you, Michelle?
I'm good. I'm excited for this interview because as I just explained to you before we got on, I really haven't interviewed with a lot of men. And I think it's so important that people gain a better understanding of me. But more specifically, men have always played an amazing role in my career and in my life. And you are one of those men who has always supported me in being the best version of myself and truly seen me. And that's something that I really appreciate about you and really love about you. So I just want you to know that before we go any further on our interview. So, first of all, I want to introduce our viewers and listeners to Dr. James Owens. And I am blessed enough to have worked with James at the University of Southern California's Marshall School of Business. I met James as I was exiting the corporate world and entering academia and truly exploring one of my first transitions post marketing into coaching. And James and I actually had offices right next door to one another. And James was working on not only his doctorate at the time, but also a full time job at Marshall. And this was prior to him being a professor at Marshall. We have actually a very similar background as far as the types of companies that we worked at in marketing, because James came from marketing as well. He worked more in luxury goods for brands like Louis Vuitton, but also worked at Coke, the Coca-Cola company. And James and I really connected right away based on the understanding that each of our backgrounds came with some pedigree. Although James is also versed in so many languages, and in addition to that, he got his MBA from Columbia, and he went to Bates undergrad. And I was always drawn to him because intelligence and intellect is one of the things that I always like to gain from. But he's somebody that you want to learn more from all the time. He always poses some sort of questions that make you grow. What are you thinking about, James?
I'm thinking about all the stuff you left off.
I know we have so much more to talk
Because,
about.
yeah,
But
because
by the way, he also asked me to be on the board of his
yeah,
nonprofit as the head of the marketing chair. And it was when he was forming his nonprofit, The World is Just a Book Away. And prior to him actually publishing his book. And that was when we actually grew even closer with one another, frankly. And our children ended up at the same preschool and we reconnected. And honestly, I could go on for hours
yeah.
about our relationship because it's been over 20 years, let's
It's had
say.
many iterations, hasn't it?
Yeah. And
Yeah,
I feel blessed that we've stuck with each other through all of it, frankly.
yeah, that's true. Me too.
Yeah. And you're always an amazing resource to bounce ideas off of because you'll definitely look at it from all angles and the pros and cons. It's never a jump right in. It's a let's think through this. It's that analytical side of you.
Yeah, thank you. Which you have also, and I think that's something that causes us to gravitate towards each other because I think those multidimensional aspects, right?
Yes.
The creativity, the analysis, the fun, the commitment to service and the highest good. I think we share a lot of those points together that we really worked very hard and your service at WIJABA at the World is Just a Book Away meant a great deal in helping us to serve children around the world. So yes, we've seen each other through thick and thin and many iterations and from little kids to high school graduation now, right?
Yeah, so crazy
Yeah.
for kids going to college. And I think in addition, yeah, just I think it's like we know when we say multidimensional, it's just there's so many iterations of ourselves. You know, they say the average person has 8 to 10 careers. I think now it's like really more like 11 to 15. And I think we've certainly seen each other through at least five of those.
Yeah, right. Well, yeah, and who's the average person?
We are not
That's an
average.
interesting
We know
that's an
that.
interesting question. Well, no, people when my son refers to me as weird, I say the word we use in our family is eccentric, right? We use
Yes.
the word eccentric. I've never seen, I say, and then I'll reflect this back on you because I think it's true of you. Ever since I was a little kid, I never felt I was looking at the same movie as most of the people around me. I
Mhm.
always felt like I was looking through a different camera,
Mm.
and I never really felt like I fit in until really quite recently in my 50s.
Isn't that weird?
It's do you know what I mean?
I do. I was just having
Yeah.
a conversation with somebody about our 50s. It's weird.
And
Anyways, we'll talk about it.
yeah, and now what I find is, well, I really don't care if I fit in, and I don't mean that I don't care about other people, but it's just if you don't like me, you don't like me, and if you do, you do. I don't have control over either. But I've also gravitated to more people, like you talked about our friendship. I've gravitated to more people who are in resonance with me.
Absolutely.
And I
Absolutely.
think that's very important to you and the work you do in your coaching.
Yes.
Um, so let's start asking you some questions.
Yeah, absolutely. I love
If
it.
I'm
I do
interviewing.
want to just say one thing about what you touched on just now about resonance versus dissonance and pursuing what is right for the highest version of yourself,
Yeah,
right? And I
absolutely.
think that is where we are very much in alignment with one another. And I think that not enough people operate from that perspective.
Well,
They're just not aware, actually.
I agree with you. One thing I learned in my spiritual program is to always say people do the best they can with the material they have at that time, right?
Mhm.
And I think when people seek out coaches, like when people seek you out as coach, what they're doing, or when you seek out a coach, because everyone I know who's a coach has coaches,
Absolutely.
because we're all growing,
Well,
right?
we can't do anything. We it's not that we can't. We
We
choose.
choose, and
Absolutely, yes.
we're bringing each other up, and
We're
then
elevating.
we're elevating, right? And by that, for your listeners, I don't at all mean to say that anyone is better than anyone else, and I know you don't mean that either. It's just the quest. Let's say the quest, right?
Mhm.
So when people come to you to seek you out as a coach, what they're really seeking, I think, is new material so they can do things differently than they did it in the past. So
Mhm.
I would like to encourage anyone who's listening to the podcast to think about that dynamic, that it's not in other words, in my belief system, everybody has this in them, this ability to go on the quest,
Mhm.
and it but it is scary. And so I want to begin this by asking you a question I thought would be interesting to ask you, which is, who is Michelle Valenzuela Wolf?
Thank you so much for asking that question. I think that's a really meaty question.
Mm,
After all, in the description of being multidimensional beings, who is Michelle? I think the reality is this. She's got so many facets of her, but really at the essence, she is one who exudes kindness and love for all people and wants the greatest and highest elevated version of yourself to show up
mm,
and to help others see those things in themselves.
mm,
I always come from service. I always come from community building. I try to come from an open ear and never impose my own views. I withhold judgment, and I really want to understand people deeply.
mm,
And I think I was always that person from the time I was a child. And I add one other thing to that, James. I'm deeply spiritual.
mm,
And that goes by learning all different types of religions. And I always come from love from the standpoint of wanting to truly understand how this is for the greater good of the person, right? Or for the collective of our
yeah,
community, because
yeah.
we are one community of energies, right? That share. And so when I say deeply spiritual, that really kind of, we could list degrees, we could list all the different things that we do, but I feel on an energetic level, and I've been that person since I was a kid, that I couldn't explain when I was younger. And I was afraid when you say about like you didn't fit in when you were younger. I felt these energies when I was younger, and I repressed the energies because I was afraid to appear different.
Mm-hmm. As so many people are. And I want to clarify a point you're highlighting here, which is when you and I, because you and I talk about spirituality a lot, I'll share with your listeners, we began with a prayer before we started. But when we say spirituality, correct me if I'm wrong, when we're saying spirituality, we're not talking about a defined definition of God. For me, it's God. Other people talk about the universe or
Universe,
angels. For you, it
Allah,
might be
whoever.
something
Yeah.
else. But we're not talking about, are you Catholic, are you Jewish, are you Buddhist, are you Muslim? About a general connection with spirit and love, really, in the universe, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And I think that that's where we both really connect as well, is that our desire is to bring more love to the world, and through every interaction, whether that be a smile to somebody, whether that be an acknowledgement of an email, or to be able to acknowledge somebody's greatest gifts. Or, by the way, sometimes it's about shining the light on an obstacle that somebody might be having within their own self, and how they can actually overcome that, right? But
Yeah.
always from love.
Yeah. And do you find it hard to stay in that place? I mean, we live in LA. This is not an easy city. I don't think it's an easy city. Maybe you do. um, do
Well,
you
right,
find
because
it?
I'm from here. So do I find it hard to stay in it? It's funny. I was having this conversation with somebody this week. I don't have a hard time staying in it. Why is that? Is it because I'm not Pollyanna-ish? I certainly see the lack from different people or whatever it is, but I choose to resonate on a different energy level. And so what I would say to you is sometimes to the detriment of myself,
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel the anger, or I don't allow myself to feel the anger that I could, right? And so I was processing through this in a situation of my own about, are those childhood traumas of survival for me to not face those things? Or is it truly because I have overcome that and I'm choosing to look to the light? Right. And I think that those are just, they're situational, right? Sometimes I don't want to feel the pain of what it might be like to be super angry at somebody, or I don't want to give them that power, right? Or give that situation that power, because it might not be worthy, right? Why should I invest that kind of energy in that when I could look toward a more positive component?
Well, let me give you an example. So, for example, I find something that triggers me is when the light just turns green and the person lays down on the horn behind me like I've been asleep at the wheel for an hour.
Totally.
And that
Total trigger.
So because we're all triggered by things, right? And I
Yeah,
know
totally.
you're triggered by things. What do you do when you're triggered to bring yourself back to center?
Breathe. The power of the breath, and asking yourself some simple questions. Is it
Such
kind?
as, is it
Is it
kind?
kind?
Mm-hmm.
Is it necessary? And what's the last question? Do you know?
Is it kind? Is it necessary? Is it true? And
Yes.
does it help the greater good? I think
Yes.
something like that, or that's
Yes.
the version that I practice.
Yeah. And so, listen, when people act out, it's usually never as a relation to you. And
Right.
we know that. We know
Right.
that because we've done a lot of different personal growth, right? So if we're able to objectively ask ourselves that question, or separate ourselves from the emotion that that person's feeling, we can answer the question that it's not about us. Most of the time when people have arguments with us, it's not about us. It doesn't mean that it's not painful and that
Yeah.
it doesn't hurt, or that perhaps the person, we can only control our own actions, as we talked about, right?
Right.
You can only control your own actions. So in which case I have to control, or actually reflect on, what is the appropriate response for me. Like the other day I was in a conversation with somebody, and they were saying a lot of different things about me that are true. And I thought,
That are true or are not
That
true?
are true.
Okay.
Yeah. Because sometimes you may not also think that what that person's sharing with you is true. But in this case, I was like, actually, that is true. But you know what? I don't need to defend this because it's actually a part of who I am. And if, to your point of like, we're at a certain age now, do I care whether or not you really like me or not? Or frankly, if you don't value those certain parts of me, then perhaps it's not the right connection. And you need to ask yourself what part of you is getting triggered by that part of me, because we are mirrors of one another, as we know.
Yeah. Now, this, I think we're getting a little bit into language that some people might be thinking, what do you
Like,
mean? What do you mean? I'm a mirror of you, and
yes.
you know, you're a woman with blonde hair, and I'm a man with a beard, and how are we mirrors? But can you explain what you mean by we're mirrors of each other?
I think one of the things that we know to be true in spirituality, right, is that we are a reflection of one another. Something that you may see within someone else is actually within you. So when you say, for example, from a perspective of like, James, I don't like your disorganization. Or when you say to me about Myers-Briggs, my acronym is ENTJ. Well, you're an ENTJ, and that's the reason why you do that. I get so irritated by it, right? But why am I actually getting irritated by it?
Because I don't think you're a J, but that's a different story.
Exactly. But you are actually mirroring for me parts of myself that I may not want to see. Right. And so that's what I mean. Mirror is like a reflection. Mm-hmm. And so we reflect certain components of one another. All people do. But it's whether or not we stop to get curious about it.
Right.
To hear those things and listen on a deeper level, which to your point about personal growth, when you said can be scary, it could also be painful.
Yes, very. Very. One of the things that I had to look at personally was my tendency in the past to blame other people for once, and then I noticed it was a pattern that was showing up in my life. For example, and I'm sure you work with this with people in coaching, yes. Right? Identifying patterns. Mm-hmm. One of my patterns was establishing what I would call one-way ships, meaning instead of a friendship, I was the person who was giving.
That's great.
But I would then blame the other person when they didn't show up the way I expected. And that is not fair because I'm the only common variable. So what I want to transition to by saying that to you is how do you help people identify patterns in their lives when you coach them and work with them and mentor them?
Well, I think first of all, in the very beginning, when we before we start the coaching process, and once we have an agreement on our process, right? Because I commit to 6-month timeframes with my clients. I do values-based assessments, and through these powerful questions that I ask, I can identify patterns, just like how you said in the beginning. Like we have some similarities, like around, like we love research actually, and we like to analyze data, and so hearing people's answers to assessments are also analyzing data, right? So I can see the patterns from the beginning, and I can name the through thread, right, from the beginning. Sometimes we do. It's also about assessing the person and whether or not they're ready to receive that information, right? Because coaching, just like any relationship, is about building trust, right? So in the beginning, often we're building trust so that way I can start to name patterns. So for example, yesterday I was on the call with a client, and she has a pretty serious situation happening, but she continues to repeat the pattern. And I've named the pattern several times about you're not putting yourself first. You're not communicating, to your point of what you said just a few minutes ago. You have an expectation that you're not naming to people. And then you're expecting that people meet you at a level that they're not even aware that you want that. And frankly, in our relationship, James, I'm sure we've had that I'm sure I have disappointed you. Maybe I haven't, because I'm perfect.
No, but, and in any relationship, and me, you.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, no, for
is,
sure. But what I mean by that is sometimes I'll say, like, because I'm super capable person, I'm just naming about myself, right? Because I'm a super capable person, people want to work with me and collaborate with me. And what a beautiful gift. Michelle has loves to say yes, right? But then in doing so has trouble like following through, because sometimes she's still thinking she's in the corporate world and she has a team to follow through on all the tasks. Mm-hmm. So then I end up disappointing people by not delivering on the timely basis, maybe, or whatever it might be, but therein goes communication, and that names patterns, right? Mm-hmm. But what you may not be aware of also, just like me talking to this client, is that I'm actually dealing with self-sabotage and different things that like I am not naming, but I'm intentionally sabotaging the process because I don't want to actually deliver this because of perfectionism, because it's not to the level that I want to actually give to you, or whatever it might be. That's totally a side note. But speaking of patterns and how we deal with it, is that once we've actually built trust, right, and I can see the through thread, right, I can actually say, I'm seeing that you're still looking for acknowledgement from people, or you're looking to actually create a change in a way, but you're not changing. Mm-hmm. So if your patterns don't change, it's like I just wrote that blog post yesterday, change starts with me. It's right. Like, as a coach, if I'm not continuing to grow and evolve and do new classes to push myself out of my comfort zone, what kind of coach am I? Right. Or what kind of therapist am I? I have to actually model a behavior that I am just as invested in personal growth as my client. And so with my client, it's about naming what you want and naming the pattern so that they can overcome it, right?
And I think that might surprise a lot of people, because when I first got involved with getting coaching and coaching others myself, which is not something I regularly do anymore, but I do on occasion, I thought people who were coaches had arrived. Mm-hmm. And then I think what I'm taking away from what you're saying, which is also in resonance with what I believe, is there is no arrival. No. We're here on earth in school, essentially, right? And the question is, do we learn from this lesson, or do what you're saying, or do we repeat the pattern?
Yes.
Because if we don't learn, it's going to repeat itself.
Yes.
And then, of course, you do that and another lesson comes up, right?
Absolutely. And I think that's a really wise statement. It's funny, going back to being an undergrad at USC, I remember, speaking of patterns, right? I remember graduation night, and I had this professor, Dr. Larry Jellison, right? And he taught this interpersonal relations class that was the hardest class I've ever taken. But I thought it was just going to be about like how you connect with people and, and then I realized that it was so hard. But he was such an impressive man, and I just wanted to learn more and more, and like from a sponge from him. And I thought, this man, I put him on this pedestal, right? Then I'll never forget graduation night that I saw him in a bar, and I said, I have to tell you, you made such an impact on my life. La, 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 la. Okay. Again, keep in mind, he teaches an interpersonal relations class. So I said, wow, your wife must be so lucky that she has you, all this stuff. And he said, well, which wife? And I said, well, I go, how many times have you been married? And he goes, 7. And I thought, holy cow, wow. That is amazing. And so that therein with patterns, right?
Yeah.
We all as humans repeat patterns. Like I just caught myself in a pattern recently that dates back to my childhood. That's about love, rejection, abandonment. I thought I had healed it. We fall back into patterns.
Yeah.
We need to recognize the pattern and choose not to repeat it.
Yes.
So it's similar, like you were saying, that you realize that like you had expectations of people, right? Is that I repeat patterns on boundaries all the time because I want to trust people.
Mm-hmm. Well, you and I both had a strong experience with that one, right?
Yes, we have.
We had a great teacher on the trust front.
Absolutely. Exactly.
Trust but verify.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
We
We need
did
the check mark like on Instagram.
don't need to repeat that pattern. We'll never repeat it. That was a great teacher. And
Yes.
I want to highlight that point that I can say, because you and I both had a painful experience with that person that we're not
Yes, we did.
naming.
Yeah.
We could choose to be like that
Yeah.
and all these,
Yeah.
expletives coming out, which I did in the beginning, by the way. And then self beating up of self for not seeing it. But really the point is, for both of us, right? What did she teach us? Because she came as a teacher.
Absolutely.
And I know that's such a big point of how you view life also, is what did this person come to teach us? Even though the experience was very negative for both
Or
of us.
powerful. Maybe the
Yeah,
word is,
powerful. Yeah, right.
yeah, like powerful. Like
Good point.
it impacted us, on a very
Good.
deep level.
Yeah, good point, because I viewed it as negative, but in hindsight, it allowed me to develop tools that have helped me be in a better place.
Yes.
And I think that's a very important point. Also, I want to ask you, Michelle, in your opinion, what are your three greatest strengths? Like that typical interview question.
Okay. And then I want to ask you what you think they are. But I think that without a doubt, connectivity is one of my greatest strengths, and the ability to honestly connect to anybody. I think when I was younger, I used to treat it like a game. I could remember like college, high school, or even after, like, you go to those networking events that we used to have to go to, right? And I'd walk in and I would be like, who do I want to connect? And it was fun for me. Networking and connection is not fun for a lot of people. For me, it's about gaining people's life story. And like I said, like when we said, well, what is it about me as a coach? I really see people's essence. Like I can find the beauty in every person, no matter who you are, And I think that, so that's definitely one of them. Connection, connectivity, building community is another one. So which they all relate to my business, right? So when I was first a mom, I remember going to this woman's class, Dr. Laura Laura, and Laura Burke, we became good friends. And she said to me after like one of the sessions, she's like, I have to share. She actually also went to USM. She has her master's in spiritual psychology. So she said, I have to tell you something. And she was my client too for a while. You build community like nobody I've ever seen. And this is a woman who runs classes, right? And I said, really? What do you mean by that? Because honestly, I didn't know it was a gift of mine. I didn't. Like, I just thought that doesn't everybody do this, right? And I said, well, what do you mean by that? And she said, what I love about you, Michelle, you don't have a type. She's like, most women come in here and like gravitates to like. If you have the certain stroller, you have whatever it might, certain means or whatever. She's like, for you, you're just interested in the person. Like, so, you have like the intellectual geeky mom, but you also have the like super cool popular lady, you have the sporty mom, and you can really relate to each person because they're all components and facets of you. And so when we say multidimensional, that's what I mean. So that's why when you look at my community or the people I choose to surround myself with, right? They're not one type of person, like not one type of culture, not one. Why did I do international marketing? Because I love culture, right? I love food. I love to know about all different facets. This goes into the analytical part of me, right? So I would say connection, community. I would say the other two, I mean, would either be intuition, because I can assess people like within minutes of meeting them, and they will say, how did you know that about me? You could call that not just intuition. You could say that I have a gift of healing or seeing, maybe beyond empath. I don't know. But I would also say collaboration goes with that. And it's something that I actually miss about working as a solopreneur or having a few people. I miss working in teams. Mm-hmm. And I think you could attest to that. Like when I worked at Marshall, that all the students at USC, they were like my team, but then we as a collective coaching group were a team too. And I, like, from the receptionist, LaTanya, to the, the person that was doing outreach, it was like I love that. Like, I love bringing people together.
Yeah. Did you want me to reflect on
Sure.
that? Because you said you're going to ask me what I think your greatest strengths are. I agree with you on those strengths. I'm not sure if you said authenticity. I don't think you said.
Oh, I didn't. Mm-mm.
And I think that's when I seek friendships now, that's really one of the seminal words that when I allow people in your life. That's one of the seminal words for me is authenticity. And that really means showing up in your vulnerability also, right? And I think I can attest, it's very hard for men to do. I can't speak as a woman because I'm not a woman, but men are, I think, biologically and culturally conditioned to not show vulnerability.
Yes,
right?
Especially being Irish.
Right, and German.
Yeah. Not that we're racially profiled or anything.
No, but
I am German.
And the reason Michelle said that is because I'm Irish and German. So I think that the authenticity, right? Because it's, and we've talked a lot about this because we live in West LA, and in my opinion, this might be different from your opinion. In my opinion, authenticity is not the number one word I would associate with the collective.
I totally agree with you.
With the collective, there are individuals.
Difficult.
Yeah. And at preschool, right, when I found that certain of the mothers, because I was there on days,
our children were at the same preschool.
Our children at the same preschool were posturing, and I don't. That doesn't resonate with me. So authenticity, I think you're very authentic, and I think I don't know how to synthesize this in a word. This quest to be of service. I can't find one word for it right now, but I would add those two to what you said.
Thank you for saying that. I appreciate being acknowledged. And yes, I will mirror your sentiments. It's not easy in LA. And I know, I grew up in a suburb of Los Angeles, but never that I'd live in West Los Angeles. Was definitely not a goal. If anything, it would be like the furthest place I thought that I'd live. But I have to say that I really am so grateful for my upbringing. And my mom and my dad mirrored those things for me and modeled it. And I think we were always taught to be humble. Always sort of to a fault, actually. Like I had to learn to celebrate who I was or my gifts, right? So I definitely really appreciate that. That's a compliment to me. And I never want to come off to anyone that to your point of the word posturing, I really don't like that. And I also have witnessed, there's a lot of wealth, right? And sometimes when you're around people that have wealth, they feel that there's an elitism that comes with it. And I think that was one of the things when I started Empower, to your point, people didn't know me as a coach. They may have known me as a business person, but they didn't know I was a coach, and they didn't know I was a coach for all those years, right? Because I never really talked about what I did, right? And as most coaches or therapists, it's not like they come out of what they're doing and tell people all about it. It would be a conflict of interest, right? So I think that It wasn't an easy, welcoming thing. Like I have a friend who also is a coach who used to also be in marketing and made her transition similarly to me, where I was actually kind of helping her, coaching her into how to start a business in coaching. And so she went to UCLA's business school, right? First. But when I was launching Empower, she said to me, you don't have to launch in your community. I just want you to know that.
Mm.
You don't have to do what you're doing. And I said to her, you know what? I want to.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, why? And I said, because if I can make it here, I can make it anywhere.
Truly. Truly. And I acknowledge that in you because it's also recognizing, and I do want to share with your listeners because we mentioned that posturing can come with wealth, but
Yes.
you and I both personally know people of great wealth who
Yes.
are so humble and
So
so
humble.
kind and so authentic that it knocks you off your feet,
Yeah,
that you can't believe they grew up that way and they are this way.
absolutely.
And those are also beautiful teachers to
Oh,
witness,
yeah. I
right?
feel like so many of them have been such great teachers to me, healers on a lot of levels.
Truly.
You
Yeah.
know, it's been beautiful and humbling to be in their presence of the gifts that they bring forward.
Truly, because as we talked about, when someone's posturing and I don't know, for me it's like being a flamingo, or not a flamingo, what do you call those things? A peacock,
Peacock, yeah.
strutting the feathers around.
A peacock.
And I always say that Chihuahuas bark, Great Danes don't bark.
So
And
true.
you and I know some real Great Danes,
Mm-hmm.
and we also know some real Chihuahuas.
Yes.
But for your listeners, I love both dogs. It's fine. I love all dogs, but I'm just talking about the barking. So I think you said earlier about the people you allow in your life.
Mm-hmm.
Now let me touch on that a little bit,
Yeah.
because why is it important to reflect on who we allow in our life? If they, if we're being authentic and we're residing in our truth, what does it matter who we allow? Can't we allow anyone in our lives?
Well, I think you know the answer to that. It's a rhetorical question. I think actually you and I, with great joy, welcome all people into our lives. And we had to learn discernment because of the fact that we have been taken advantage of for our generosity, for our kindness, for honestly going back to the word love. Mm-hmm. People are attracted to the energy that we export and contain, right? Because it's maybe the lack that they don't have, or going back to the word mirror, right? So I think the word discernment comes in for me because I think you need to be reflective of others' value set and how it fits in with yours.
In terms of deciding if you're going to allow them into your innermost circles, let's say.
Innermost circle. And yeah. I think, since I was young, friends have always said, how many friends do you need? Like, it's hard for me to tell if I'm your closest friend because you have so many friends.
Yeah.
But I think as we grow older and wiser, those friends, well, first of all, I became more discerning about who truly can be in my circle, because I want to be clear, I'm friendly to everyone.
Yeah.
And kind to everyone, but they are not all in my circle.
Well, and that's the point I want to hammer in on. Yes. I want to drill in on. Why is it important for your listeners to understand from your perspective? Why is it important the people we surround ourselves with? Yeah. Why is that important?
Well, first of all, they're a reflection of you, as we talked about with mirroring, right? But whatever energy exchange is, you are what you attract, right? So I think for me, like, I'm super protective of my energy. My role is to serve others, right? And my boundaries around where I invest my time, especially when I have 3 children and I'm married. And again, we talked about that I have a large network of friends, right? I only want to be around people that want to bring me to my highest good,
Mhm.
right?
Amen.
See my value, acknowledge my gifts, but it's an exchange of energy. So it can't be one-sided,
Right.
right?
Okay.
It can't
Yeah.
be just me exporting to that person and that person's taking. We've all been with those friends that are toxic and drain you. And you have to ask yourself the question, what are the characteristics of a friend, partner, ally, coworker, work environment, whatever it is, because it's all in the same, that I want to embody and
Right.
that I want to be around? Because
Yes.
if our energy, like, I remember, years ago working in the Career Resource Center, and what is it, 25 years ago now, that I was, I came in on a high, dude. Like, I was like resonating on this high space. I had all the students coming to me and I was like, this is amazing, right? And I remember saying to certain people that we worked with, because they were so negative and it was saturating, and I come from the corporate world where we're measured on performance, and I was like, I don't understand, doesn't anybody care? and so I remember some of you saying to me, be careful of where you invest your energy. And I, at one point, didn't understand that, became to understand why. But in addition, I, reflecting back on some of these individuals we worked with, was saying, if you're not happy, why are you in this job?
Yeah.
You invest 80% of your time in your job and the environment. Why invest your energy in it?
Yeah, and I want to share that you and I, as you said earlier, I just want to reiterate, we worked with really great people. So we're talking about
with amazing people,
a minority of people who behaved
a
that
very
way.
tiny percent.
Uh,
But
but
as we
yes,
know,
and I remember talking to you about that. Yeah,
yes.
yeah,
But it's just like in any community or group, like it's like one person can
affect
trickle out their energy to the rest. So why am I protective of where I invest my time and who I choose to be friends with or choose to have relations with? Is because I want to maintain my positive outlook, and I want it to be a collective exchange of great information and great conversation and fun and all my values.
Absolutely. And I want to pick up on something you said a little bit earlier, which is that in your opinion, you and I were taken advantage of. I want to reflect something back to you and see how you react to it. The way I look at it,
Interesting words I say.
well, I don't know. That's my memory. My interpretation now is that I allowed myself to be taken advantage, and that's such an important word for me, and such an important component of taking responsibility, right? Because people don't take advantage. Maybe they take advantage of us the first time, but then
the second time it's a choice.
Then we're allowing it. So what's your thought on that?
Well, I think to your point, all interactions are choice. And so that's why I said taking advantage of, because that's not usually in my language. So maybe it's your language, but I love you. But I would say that when we choose to allow someone into our lives, right? All interactions are a choice, and it's a mutual choice between two people. So when someone does something, right, that we're not in agreement with, it's not in our integrity, we have a choice to either continue receiving that, right, or set a boundary and say, this isn't working for me. Mm-hmm. Now, going back to childhood traumas and patterns, right? I like to be liked. So have I not found myself in situations that, like, I've repeated a pattern because I'm like, oh, but I'll just give them this one last chance. Or, oh, but I like that person, even though it's painful for me what I'm receiving. Because it's not only just wanting to be liked, it's like, really, that goes into, am I loving myself? Do I love myself enough to allow myself to be treated certain ways.
Yes.
And I think, one thing I want to say is we are blessed enough in this exchange that we are of a level that we can have uncomfortable conversations where we may not agree at all, but you can say, I hear what you're saying. I get why you're saying that, but I don't agree with you. And here's why. Most people will get triggered.
Yeah.
One of them fly off the handle, right? And then it's unresolved.
Yeah.
I search and hope for having the uncomfortable conversations, even if they're painful, to get resolution or clarity. It doesn't mean again, and it's not a one-way exchange. It's a two-way exchange.
Right.
Each person gets to say what they want to say before the end of the conversation. And then when it gets to a point where it's like, you know what? I don't think we're actually going to get anywhere. We create space.
Yeah.
And maybe you come up with another date that you revisit that. But if you truly believe that that person is of value to you, or you care enough, you actually stop and you create time and space for that person before it dissolves the relationship when it's unnecessary.
It's so important. And I want to share, because you've met my dear friend, and she doesn't like it when I call her mentor, but my dear friend of many years, Jenny Ming, who founded Old Navy. And of course, you've met Jenny.
She founded Old Navy, right?
She founded Old Navy and grew it to a $10 billion corporation and the cover of Business Week, top 50 women in business in the world, et cetera, et cetera. And I remember saying to Jenny, how do you know if it's right? And she said, if you're feeling excited and nervous at the same time, you're growing.
I totally agree.
So, and on that note, what is Michelle feeling excited and nervous about right now?
Thank you for bringing that up. The TEDx talk.
That we're working on together.
Yes. So James, to be clear to all the listeners out there, is my coach for my TEDx talk. He has actually coached several people that have like well over 2 million views on their TEDx talks, and you can actually name their names if you'd like. So I want to be clear about something. James called me like 5 years ago or something, telling me that he had a dream about me, and that he dreamt that he was coaching me for a TEDx talk. And the thing is that James is, like we defined, super spiritual. And so I brushed him off, and I kind of just said it like very flippantly as I can, for those of you who know me, because that's about receiving, number one. And that's one of my obstacles, right? Receiving, number one, that he saw me at that level. But number two, facing the fear, right? And I said to him, okay, whatever, that's great. I'm not ready. I think I said something more than that, but we'll leave it at that. And so you called me 2 years later and you said, I had another dream about you. And I said, I'm still not ready. But then during COVID, I mean, I go through everybody knows me that I like to challenge myself and I like to have big goals. And I called him during COVID and I said, I'm ready now. And he said, okay. And one of the things that I love about you, James, and I said this earlier, is you always acknowledge me. And that's one of the things about many men that I have worked with, is that they have acknowledged me. They've stopped to see my gifts, my talents. And you said to me, Michelle, people can buy a coach and they can teach them the how-tos, but what they can't do is buy your charisma.
Yes, I remember that. And that's true.
I was like, okay, he's right. That's true. And going back to my gifts of what are my top strengths, I have a way of connecting to people on a level that I know that I have a broader audience I'm meant to reach.
Yeah.
Why am I scared? Not because I don't think I could do it. That's not it for me. Because I actually kind of get excited about like the visual, and I've had visualizations in my meditations of me taking stage and saying a little joke, or, those things. I mean, you know me, right? But it's actually all the logistics in between.
Yes, you and I both with logistics. Yeah.
And what were my first questions to you? I just need to know, like, I mean, well, how am I going to apply to it? And I need to know, like, what does the application look like? And you were like, don't worry about it. I got you. And I was like, no. But like, that was what I wasn't about writing the actual TED Talk, presenting the actual TED Talk. It was like all that other stuff, like the logistics.
Yeah, take a step and the path will emerge, right? And you did. I honor you for that, for taking that step. And you're right. I can because I don't think we've mentioned that I teach communication. That's the area I focus on. But I can teach people to be more charismatic, but it's true, you can't really teach charisma. And we see this with politicians. It's so evident with people when they're running for office. You see certain people, and I mean, without being politically splintering, I'll say Barack Obama for me just exudes charisma, whether you like him or not. The man just exudes charisma. Totally. And other presidents have different gifts. Ronald Reagan, they're all, even the political field, Ronald Reagan exuded charisma. He just could talk about anything, and you'd be mesmerized. Right?
Exactly.
So yeah, that is definitely a gift of yours. And what I take away from that for your listeners is also encouraging them to examine what they feel excited about and what they are nervous about at the same time, right? And that
I think that's such a beautiful way to look at growth. As you know, I've been going through some exponential growth in the last year. And I feel like there's ebbs and flows in your life, right? Of like seasons where you're super challenged by the things that are happening, but we know that we're both excited and scared at the same time. And yet the path is not unveiled to us. I don't know if I'm taking a right turn or a left turn.
Correct. Yeah.
Or going straight for that matter. Yeah. However, I have to pursue the path in order for it to be unveiled to me. And those are things that people
so powerful
forget.
What you just said.
Oh,
so powerful.
Those are things that people forget in our personal growth journey, that, when you've been doing something for a long time, say you're a lawyer, because we know most lawyers are not that happy in their jobs. And I have many lawyers in my practice. So what I would say is, when you have been in a job for a long time that requires you to be a professional, right? The title of professional. You don't know the path. There's this sequential step to get to the path. When you enter new phases of personal growth, there is not a defined path. And that is true entrepreneurship. However, it is also true personal growth. I mean, if I talked about half the stuff I've been doing in the last 6 months, people would be like, what?
Absolutely. I know now, I think we've been talking for almost an hour here, and I want to be.
We could do part 1 and part 2, but I think we need to be cognizant of that. Yeah. Yes. And we probably need to wrap it up, because I do have I have a meeting. But
I would like to ask you 2 other questions.
Sure.
1, what is the question you wish I had asked you that I didn't ask you?
That's a great question. I'm gonna actually put that back on you. What's a question that you'd like to ask me that you've always wanted to know? Because I'm an open book. And in which case, like when you go back to the word authenticity, so I'll answer any question that someone has. I mean, I think you covered quite a bit of like.
Let's say you're on the point of transitioning. You're 125 years old, and you look back and you say, or longer if medicine advances, you look back and you say, I'm most proud of.
Okay. I'm most proud of being the most authentic, kind, serving to larger communities human being that sees each person at their greatest value and their essence and chooses to come from love.
Beautiful. And final question. At the end of this episode, what final words of wisdom would you like to leave your listeners with?
I think going back to the question of at the end of your duration of life, right? What do you want to look back on? Mm-hmm. I don't like to think of it as like, what's the legacy you're leaving, right? But I think to myself, so many women, because most of our audience is women, right? Or people in general, talk about time we know is an excuse, right? So people would say, if I just had the time to do this, if I only did this, what is that question for you? And instead of saying time is the excuse or the factor, what would you put into place to take one step forward today? Challenge yourself to get on the path. Because when we're 85 plus years old, doesn't mean that we're not choosing to still grow. Mm-hmm. But we have greater limitations upon us. So I think for me, you know, when you ask the question, like, what I want to leave, what are the things that I'd like to look back on, or how do I want people to perceive me? I think back to why I started Empower in the first place. One of the reasons why I started Empower was because my mom was ill, as you know, for 8 years and had Alzheimer's. I always think about what a brilliant mind she was. Brilliant. She dedicated, and that was her choice, her life to her children. I knew that if I didn't step in deeper to my personal goals and growth, I would always regret it. I don't want to regret. I want to know that I lived, I experienced, I tried. And through those learnings, because it's not always a success, I had growth. And that's what I want for others.
To have growth.
Yeah.
Yes. That's really beautiful.
I want full love too. Not only just for myself, but for others.
Yeah. No, true. I mean, very true. What can we say? Growth and love. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Michelle, for giving me this opportunity to talk to you today. It was a thrill, really fun.
Well, I just want to tell you, I love you so much. And I'm just so grateful for our friendship and for all the business opportunities that we've had to work with each other, collaborate, see each other. Like literally, I see you, I see your essence. I see the gifts that you bring forward to others. And WIJABA is the world is just a book away, which is the acronym that we keep using, is an amazing organization that truly, I remember when we were writing the mission statement, I was like, why hope? Yeah. You know, it truly gives hope for children, for their futures. Amen. To provide education to them. So if there's ways that we could give back, small donations would be amazing for James and the organization. So
thank you. WIJABA.org.
WIJABA.org. And if there's on Instagram, what is it?
WIJABA.
Okay, it's WIJABA. WIJBA.
WIJABA.
ABA. Yeah, sorry about that. And the website is www.wijaba.com. Okay,
org.
Perfect. And org. Again, .org. www.wijaba.org. James, I just want to take 1 minute because we didn't do this in the beginning because we jumped right into the interview. Can you please tell people a little bit about your background?
Oh my God. I was hoping we weren't doing that today. What? Let's see.
You can actually record it and send it to me later if you'd like.
No, I'll just, my background. Let's see. I studied, I'm from a small town in Massachusetts in the Berkshires, which is where Norman Rockwell lived and painted. So I really did grow up I literally grew up in a Norman Rockwell painting. with some very positive things and some very painful childhood things as well. I studied French and history as an undergrad at Bates College. Talk about feeling scared. I moved to France after college. I had done my junior year abroad in Nice. I moved to Paris with a one-way ticket and $1,000 and the naivete of a 21-year-old thinking anything's possible with 12.5% unemployment in France. And that's when I worked for Louis Vuitton. And then I worked for Coca-Cola Africa, French-speaking Africa, based in Windsor, which we think of today because today we lost the Queen of England, of course, which is incredibly sad. Who, for those of you who remember Walkman when we used to wear them, I used to run on the long walk in Windsor, and once I got a very polite toot behind me, and I turned around, and it was the Queen because I was.
That's so amazing.
Yeah, that was amazing, and traveled in French-speaking West Africa mostly, and then I worked for Agfa Gevaert, which was a time when we took pictures with cameras, which we no longer do really with film, as communication director internationally. MBA from Columbia, then I worked for Bain Consulting, then I worked in film on Before and After, with which starred Liam Neeson and Meryl Streep. And that's what gave me the connections to do my book, which I don't think we talked about, which is also called The World is Just a Book Away. Helped me do my book, my anthology of 60 of the most influential people in the world and the books that inspired them. And then after movies, the Career Center, teaching, my master's in writing, starting the charity. The book took me 15 years. The doctorate took me 11 years. If I ever go back for another degree, please call forward.
I will definitely call you, because I think when you were starting your doctorate, I was like, you're insane. Why are you doing that?
Yeah.
You know, you don't need a doctorate. That's what I said to you.
I know. And then, of course, we have children who are at preschool together. My older son is a senior at Loyola now, Alexander. And my younger son is 9 months old, and he's really been the focus of my life and joy.
Beautiful baby.
Right now in this year. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's me.
Gift. That is you. Well, and it's just so much more than that. So that, what are you, 25?
A little bit. Let's say 39. 39. Yeah.
Who wants to live 25 again anyways? I think 34, we were like, right. All right. Well, again, I'm so grateful to hear all of that story from you, and I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. Okay.